Hi, it's John again. In the last video, I talked about the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous and about giving my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood Him to be. That's the wording in the 12 steps. Now, originally the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous came from a group called the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group were a Christian organisation who, they didn't have all of the steps. They had, it was about 7 of them. But they believed in sort of recognising a problem, confessing that problem, handing your will and your life over and then making amends for that problem. And that's kind of where the programme of the Alcoholics Anonymous came from. The other thing that was interesting was that Bill Wilson, who was one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, when he was in hospital, he had what he called a religious experience, where he believed that he experienced God. And at the time, he wrote to a famous psychologist called Carl Jung. And he said, this is what happened to me, and, what do you think about it? And Carl Jung said that he believed that probably that needed to be part of the program, which is why the second and third step came the way they did. And also in later steps when it talked about, prayer and meditation. So Carl Jung suggested that they needed that part of the program because of the transformation. Because when we drink or we take drugs, we do that to transform us into something else, something more interesting, something more, witty, something more sexy, something that we ourselves like that bit more. Now, the transformation for other people might not seem what we believe it is, because most of the transformations in here is how we think about ourselves. And often people talk about this emptiness inside and that the alcohol fills it. In fact, the first time I really identified with people at Alcoholics Anonymous was when somebody was talking and he said that when he discovered alcohol, he found a bit that God had left out. And for me, it was such a revelation. And I thought, that's me. Dean Martin used to talk about how, the famous entertainer, he used to talk about how he was born 2 drinks behind the rest of the world. And that he needed those 2 drinks just to catch up. And again, I identified with that, because I remember one time when I was in a pub and we were all talking about what it was like when we drank, and what it was like the next day. And this one was saying, oh, I feel really sick. And another one was saying, oh, I'm a real hangover. And I said, I just don't feel real. And it was this old guy in the pub. He was old to me then, probably a young guy to me now. But anyway, he turned around to me and he said, you better be careful, you might have a problem. And I poo-hooed it, because I said, you're the one that's talking about being ill and having headaches. I don't have that. But he was right, because alcohol, for me, was what filled this hole. Now, as I say, Carl Jung talked about, you needed something like, a spiritual experience, or as they talked about in Alcoholics Anonymous as well, a spiritual awakening, because there's 2. The spiritual experience was the kind of Damascus Road experience where, it was a blinding light, it all happened there and then. The religious experience was something, it was like a slow burn, as people started to waken up. And for many people, that religious awakening is actually the one that lasts, for the likes of Bill Wilson, he chased that spiritual experience for much of his life. But anyway, in the last video, I talked about actually getting sober, you know, getting rid of the craving. And that was God. It came into my life and took away this craving. But there's two parts to getting sober. And the first part is stopping drinking, obviously. The second part is staying stopped. And it's the staying stopped that most people find difficult, you know. Coming off alcohol is, I wouldn't say easy, but it's something that many people do, even if it's only because they're so ill. But staying off it, for myself, I couldn't last any longer than 2 months off a drink. And I used to sort of be really, really ill when I came off drink. Then after that, I started to feel okay, you know, and I would think, I should have done this years ago. And then after a wee while, I think, you know, it wasn't that bad. And then I think, well, I just the one won't hurt. And then it was back again. So I go through this process where I would talk myself back into drinking again. And the whole merry would go round, would go round again. And the thing is, I just never seemed to learn. I never seemed to learn. So staying stopped was, as I say, difficult. And I had prayed that night, I said, God help me, and he had taken away that craving. But I still had to live sober, and that was a big difference. Living sober, taking the alcohol out of my life. And what I found was, and initially I thought I was going to go to I was in the elephant's graveyard, you know, you had X amount of alcohol allotted to you, X amount of happiness allotted to you, and I had used up both. So I was in the elephant's graveyard. I just sit here until I die, and please, let it not be too long. That was the way I approached it. I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to go back to that, but I didn't know how to live, and that was part of the problem now. And really what I found was when the alcohol was taken away, then it left a gap. You know, it's not a gap the way I talked about before, about this, you know, this hole inside. It left a gap where I had spent so much time sitting in the pub talking about what I was going to do. So much time chasing alcohol, so much time chasing money for alcohol, it was a full-time job being an addict. And now I found that I had all this space, all this time. I could do other things. And that's exactly what I did. I found that I had an opportunity now. I had an opportunity to do some of the things I had talked about. I sat in the pub and I talked about, oh yes, I would love to scuba dive. Oh yes, I would love to climb mountains. Oh yes, I would like to sail a yacht around the Greek islands. Oh yes, I would like to go back to education. And I can tell you I did all of those things. I scuba dived, I've even cage dived with great white sharks. I've been, you know, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. I've climbed mountains in Scotland. I sailed a yacht around the Greek islands, and I went back to education. I got myself a degree in psychology. I got a fellowship from the Scottish office, and I then studied for a PhD. And I got a PhD, and I became a lecturer at Glasgow University, and then I became a senior lecturer at the Centre for Alcohol and Drug Studies, and trained many of the therapists in Scotland. So I had been given this opportunity. And part of this was starting to get to know God. Yeah. At the time, what I tended to use was I used the Serenity Prayer. That was kind of my connection with God at that time. And if you don't know the Serenity Prayer, it's, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Because many of us try to change things that, you know, we should actually be accepting, and, you know, accepting things that we should be changing, which is why the wisdom to know the difference is so important. And I used that prayer many, many times, but Did I have a relationship with God? No, I can't say I did. I saw God, I prayed quite a lot, but I saw God more a bit like Santa Claus, you know. I would send him messages of what I needed, what I wanted, yeah, and hope that he fulfilled that. Mostly what I wanted was a bit of peace. Mostly what I wanted was, give me a job. Mostly what I wanted. It was that kind of way. Yeah. So I would my prayers were like phoning up and leaving a message in his answering machine. The last thing I wanted was God to pick up, and say, hello, God here. I didn't want that. Didn't want that at all. Years later, I started to explore having a relationship with God. Much of that was through Lou, because if Lou and I were going to get married, then, I had to start and look at having a relationship with God. And I've talked about it elsewhere, about, going and finding God. But one of the things that stopped me was this idea that Christians were a bit straight-laced. There wasn't a lot of fun in Christians, In fact, it was a pretty miserable bunch, and if they weren't miserable, they were bigoted, and I didn't want to be part of that. I really didn't want to be a straight-laced bigot. And then I realised I actually was a straight-laced bigot, because I had these beliefs about Christians. I was bigoted towards them. But to start and find out, this was not the case at all. There's a difference between religion and spirituality. Religion is just following a set of rules. Spirituality is following God. And these are quite different things. Yeah. It's a bit like, being legalistic as far as, keeping rules are concerned, or accepting the spirit of rules, and they are actually very different. They're very, very different. Look at court trials where somebody is pronounced not guilty through technicalities, So that's more kind of legalistic than spiritualistic. And the more I found about God, the better it became, the easier it became. And finding out about God was finding out about me. And I'm going to leave it there, because I want to pick up on this point again. I want to pick up on it in the next video, because if you're an addict, one of the things that you have plenty of is guilt and shame. And that was one of the reasons I didn't want to talk to God, because of all the guilt and shame. But if you look to the next video, I'll tell you what happened about that. Okay?